Welcome to Tea Garden Talk, which is a lockdown special put on by gardenmasterclass.org. It's at 4 o'clock London time, Monday to Friday. Our normal business is putting on day workshops led by garden and landscape experts across the British Isles, and we're trying to organise in the Netherlands with occasional events in Germany and France. We're also now putting on pay-to-view webinars, which we're organising on a month-to-month basis. We do a regular newsletter, which at the moment we're bringing out every few weeks because of the rapidly changing situation. If you'd like to get our newsletter, please send us an email on gardenmasterclass@gmail.org, and that will stay very strictly with us. Tea Garden Talk itself is put on as a free service during lockdown, but we really appreciate donations to cover our running costs and time. If you'd like to donate, please go to the online page of our website. Thank you. Garden Masterclass and Tea Garden Talk are run by Annie Guilfoyle, who's based in Sussex in southern England, and Noel Kingsbury, based in central Portugal. So we look forward to seeing you and one day, hopefully, to meet you. Well, today we're travelling, and we're travelling to Eastern Europe. Now, for somebody my age, sort of 60 and above, we grew up in a very divided world, which I think anyone younger finds it very difficult to imagine just how different things were. There was a free market, a more or less democratic West, dominated by the United States, and then there was the communist bloc, which the Soviet Union, dominated by Russia, kept an iron grip over its part of the world. The Soviet Union was basically a cover for what was essentially a Russian empire. Now, one of the biggest differences between these two parts of the world is that it was very difficult to travel in the communist Eastern Bloc, and it was very difficult indeed for citizens of that bloc to travel outside their own countries. So quite apart from all the economic and political problems and oppression of the communist bloc, the intense frustration felt by many people that they couldn't travel to the West. Anyway, 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, enormous set of changes, the collapse of communism. A key event was the independence of the former Soviet Republic of Latvia in 1990. Now, interestingly, one of the key figures in the Latvian independence movement, and the first public figure to call for Latvian independence from Russia, was the editor of the Soviet garden magazine, Jānis Ruksans, who I recently profiled in The Plantsman. Jānis is a fantastic character, and I think one day, hopefully, we'll have him on as a tea garden talk or a webinar. Anyway, he, of course, as soon as he could travel, the first thing he did was go to RHS Garden at Wisley. So it's great that a gardener played a crucial role in the fall of communism. So he took 3 years out from his gardening to work in politics, and then went back, in fact, to setting up a bulb nursery and bulb business. From 1993 to 95, my girlfriend, now wife, Jo, worked in the newly independent Republic of Slovakia at Comenius University in an advisory role. So this was a great opportunity for me to get to know a part of the world that had been until then, and in some ways still is, a bit of a backwater. And I discovered there was actually a very rich gardening heritage here, particularly in the Czech Republic. And again, I think we'll be hearing from the Czechs perhaps later on this year, because there's really a lot went on there, and a lot of really good work with perennials and public planting continues to happen. I've always had a lot of invitations to lecture and teach in Eastern Europe. I think it's probably about 5 or 6 countries there now I've taught in. People seem to totally get it about perennials. Perennials do really, really well in these continental climates, and there's funding for public planting and private gardens. So there's now a terrific interest in garden design, and that's one of the things we want to explore today. But we're going to start off in Poland, looking at 2 aspects of horticulture in the communist period in Poland. My great discovery of last year was the work of Professor Alexander Łukasiewicz. So here I am at the Poznan Botanic Gardens, where he worked with the director and a member of her staff, looking at this incredible archive of botanical drawings, mostly of plant root systems. I've always been fascinated by the incredible range that perennials have in terms of their growth habits and their performance. But all my questions seem to have been answered by Professor Łukasiewicz's 1962 doctoral thesis, which I think very few people outside Poland seem to know about. It's a bit like the physicist's theory of everything. Here is the perennial grower's theory of everything. Fortunately, I've got a very good Polish friend who we'll soon be meeting, who helped me with the translation. And all of this work was supported by these fantastic botanical drawings, which we'll soon be hearing about. Over 500 of them, all in the archive at Poznan, drawn over 20 years of work. And indeed, all the original specimens that were drawn are still preserved in bottles of formalin, and shrubs as well. So this has in fact been a real revelation, and there's the possibility of working with the Botanic Gardens on publishing some of these in future years, which would be a wonderfully exciting opportunity. But I think this very much illustrates just the very high quality of a lot of work that did go on under communism in some East European countries, and a very strong scientific tradition, a lot of which I think we really need to rediscover. And here is my friend Małgorzata Kietrzyńska talking about the botanical artist.
Beautiful, really artistic and very detailed, very precise drawings.
And we found out that this had all been drawn by one woman.
Yes, it was Honorata Obrąpalska, an artist from Poznan who, well, first she was a photographer, I think.
In fact, I think a surrealist photographer. I think.
Yes, yes. But then when she began to work with Professor Łukasiewicz, it seemed that they worked for I can't remember how many years, but over 20 years, that's for sure, because there were early drawings, and then she got so specialized, and so these are really wonderful drawings. I don't know.
Yes, it was. They were quite remarkable, especially when you consider that all of those roots she drew would have had to have been washed, and I can tell you it can take ages to wash all the soil off a plant root system.
And remember, we were told that she was so skillful that she would make a drawing in a really I don't know, an hour or 2 hours.
Yes,
she became really quick making those drawings,
yes,
and different phases of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mainly production of vegetables and flowers for the florist shops. But there was a very active society, horticulture society or association, that would work on promoting education and making shows, beginning to organize trips and gathering.
There's one photograph you sent me of, I think, was your father on a trip, on a study tour to the Netherlands.
To Holland, I think it was. Yes, it was later. It was in the 50s.
Yeah.
But it was a miracle, really, to get material to build greenhouses, then to get seeds, to get seedlings. It was it was a big challenge really to work to work at these times. So
what crops were they growing in these greenhouses?
they were growing. They were mostly mixed production. So it means that they produced both vegetables and flowers, and it was partly because they had to contract some of the production to them to the state. It means that they could buy coal, but they had to sell to the state certain amount of vegetables. So that's why I think the mixed production, they didn't really specialize in just flowers or just vegetables.
No.
It was mostly mixed. So these were tomatoes, cucumbers, lettuce, and flowers, mostly carnations, roses, of course. Later on, freesias, chrysanthemum, callas. Yeah, of course. With time there were more species, more that they could produce. There were orchids, of course.
One thing I remember from spending a bit of time in Bratislava in the early 90s was just how important cut flowers were, far more than in England.
Probably to maybe to cheer up this gray reality. Really, yeah, we used. We need flowers. If you go to visit someone, you buy flowers, a bunch of flowers. If you for all occasions, or even without occasion, you have flowers at home, and you give flowers to your friends, to people you go to visit. Yeah, the glass house business was one of the very few private businesses within the communist regime. I think at first, after the war, there was a just huge shortage of food, so it was just a necessity to let produce certain crops, and because of the climate, it's difficult to produce, well, impossible to produce lots of crops over the winter, or so. Glass houses or cold frames, they were a necessity. And why it never, well, there were different periods. Probably the 50s were really difficult, late 50s. There was a lobby, we would say today, that these were experts from the business that were they had their body within the Ministry of Agriculture in Warsaw, and they were efficient enough to make the business go on, and they would try to get credits for new businesses. They would discuss some fiscal issues. So I think it's mainly thankful to this society or association that was really very active and doing a great job.
So very effective lobbyists within the system.
Yes, I would
think about it, that you had this incredibly inefficient economic system, but the possibility that at the end of the week you could have a bunch of tomatoes or a bunch of flowers, a small price to pay to have this small group of little capitalists actually making money and running, because really they were the only independent businesses, weren't you?
I think there were some more, but mainly in the food production. It was necessary. Yes, and this was this whole calendar, because the production, of course, was in spring. Everybody would wait for fresh cucumbers and tomatoes. Then certain festivities. I don't know, the Women's Day, or
International Women's Day.
that you know. Enormous amount of flowers were needed then, and because you would see everybody buying flowers, so you would produce flowers for certain periods in the year calendar. Chrysanthemum for November, for the All Saints Day. So I think it helped maintain some of the normality. Yeah, and different. Also, we celebrate name days. So. Birthdays, name days, and like very popular name days like Jan or Piotr or Pavel. Then you need flowers to give them. So yeah, that was one of the, not the only business that was allowed, but one of the very few. Mm-hmm. But of course, it doesn't mean that the business could run very easily. There were all types of controls, and my dad was telling me about some colleague of his that got to prison for a year. He spent in prison because he bought coal from black market. Yeah. So it was extremely. It was dangerous. It was moving on the edge, really. You needed to get supplies, and at the same time, your neighbors were looking. And I remember also my dad telling that once he bought and coal was a main. It was something that we couldn't do without, because. My parents had their glass houses were about 2,000 square meters, and they would need 2 tons of coal per day for 24 hours. So it was it was so hard for me to really to imagine this. So these were whole mountains of coal that you would have to have on your courtyard. And once this transport of coal came in, and the very next day the militia was there asking my dad where did he get it from, and happily he had all the papers right. It was official, but and the militia told him just be careful with your neighbor, because it was the neighbor that informed them to come. And very strange times, and very 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 surreal to us when we think about it.
Yes.
And the amount of coal was just unbelievable. He told me that it was, I wrote it somewhere, that it was, they used both coal and coking coal. Yes. Half of coal and half of coking coal. And they, for the winter season, they would use 400 tons of coal to run the business. So I remember the huge chimney that was on the next to the greenhouses. And when the temperature, and there was a bell on the chimney, like a school bell. And when the temperature began to decrease, the bell would ring, and ring in the middle of the night, because it was the night, really. So everybody was up. I can still remember this.
Right, thank you, Małgosia. Sorry about the editing and the bad haircut continuity. And from Poland, we go on to neighbouring Lithuania, where we'll talk to Rasa Laurinavician, who many of you may know as a social media commentator on perennials, and then to Kiev in Ukraine to talk to Victoria Manoilo, a garden and landscape designer, and then back to Lithuania to talk to Lina Ljubatit, who runs a very successful and very innovative garden education and promotion business. Rasa,
Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. You grew up on a collective farm in the countryside, I believe.
No. Actually, my family, we lived in this town, not a huge town, but still it was a town. But both of my grandparents on both sides, they lived in the country. They were farmers. So I am very well familiar with that reality.
Yeah. Yes. And did your share of hoeing the sugar beet, I believe.
Yeah, because in those days, actually, we didn't have any independent farmers, because if you were in the country, you had to, belong to a collective farm, kolkhoz. I'm sure you heard that name before. And so what it really meant that actually people, they had to contribute in kind, doing some kind, sort of chores for the collective, for the kolkhoz. So in most cases, and I think most kids of my age who had grandparents in the country, they are very well familiar with the hoeing the 2 kilometer long sugar beet furrows, which was basically, it wasn't something that we were looking forward to, and you would imagine that's not the best start for a kind of career in gardening.
No, I'm surprised it hasn't put you off.
It actually did, until I was about 30. And I remember when I must have been something like 27 or 8, and I was studying in UK. And I remember some middle upper class person, waxing about how wonderful it is to pluck a freshly grown lettuce off the in the garden. I thought, God, not me, I'm never ever gonna have anything to do with soil again, and look at me now. So yeah, I mean,
so what got you into
an experience
then? Because you're very well known through social media as this fantastic ambassador, really, for perennials.
Thank you.
And we're going to show some photographs now of your garden. So how did you, what got you engaged then with gardening?
Well, it's a good question, because I get asked every now and then, but I don't know actually an answer to that, because here this year there were some students writing courseworks about my marketing strategy and stuff, and actually there was never any strategy at all. I just did what I found interesting at the time. And why did I get into perennials? I don't know, because I've been in this field now for more than 20 years, and I think it was perennials from the very start. Oh, that's my Facebook.
Yes, this is your public face, Rasa, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And your wonderful garden on the outskirts of Vilnius.
Oh, Vilnius, yes. I actually, it's a part of it. So, well, I didn't really, because for the last 10 years, probably my main area of interest is plants for naturalistic garden, style. But before that, I, went through all the stages. There were roses and peonies and clematis and lilies and irises and whatnot. And then I somehow, more than 10 years ago, I came across a guy called Pete Odolf, and and then it went only, deeper and deeper, and well, I kind of seems like I got stuck in the style.
Well, it's a good style to be stuck in. I mean, these winter images, I think, are fantastic, because
it's a huge I mean, for all tastes, for all occasions. I mean, the variety is like, you know yourself, is
Yes.
huge. So,
And
so
you've helped plant up a Piet Adolf garden, haven't you?
twice, yes.
Right.
Yes, I was lucky enough. Once I did help planting the botanical Udolf Meadow in Delaware Botanical Garden, and then last year I was very fortunate to help in planting a private garden in Rhode Island.
Right.
It was, yeah, excellent, experience, as you would expect.
Yes. Yes.
Because I've always been very interested on, one thing is learning from all the planting combinations and how plants put together, but another thing that I was very curious is how do you logistically manage thousands of plants. So in Delaware, planting at that stage was 17,000, and in Rhode Island we actually did 70,000. So yeah, this is kind of excellent, learning.
Yes. Yes. And do you work as a garden designer?
Sorry, you broke off.
Yes. And you actually work now as a garden designer, do you?
Yes, a garden designer, planting designer. I also teach courses on naturalistic planting. Had some in Ukraine and Belarus earlier this year, before the virus began. So yeah, also do garden tours.
Yes.
Double trades, and you know what they say about them. But yeah, mine, the thing that I love is working with plants, putting them together, and kind of finding right plants for challenging situations. So yeah, I love that.
Great, thank you. So I think, thank you, Rasa. On to Kiev and Victoria. So Victoria, I met you, I think it was 2014. You invited me to, was it 2016?
2015.
Yeah, 2015. Yes, you invited me over to teach a 2-day course in Kiev in the middle of the winter, snow on the ground, but you'd organised a fantastic array of perennials for us to look at, and I remember the incredible enthusiasm of the audience. I also have a very clear memory of having a phone call with Annie. I was in my hotel room, and this was during one of those phases when there was these attacks by Vladimir Putin-backed forces in the Donetsk region. And I remember talking to Annie on the phone, and Annie was convinced that there were bullets flying over my head, and there's the sort of tone of worry in her voice. I shall never forget it. I say, look, Annie, it's all right. We're a long way away. We're in Kiev. You must come here. And indeed she did. So Victoria, what's your gardening story?
Oh, my garden story. I didn't. I haven't done any big work in kolkhoz or in the sovkhoz. Soviet times. I had only dacha, as my parents were from the. My family with roots from. Went back to the countryside of East and northern Ukraine, and my father was a CEO of big Soviet plant, so he has this dacha, what in the culture of Soviet times, a place where people can grow some for pleasure, for have vacations, or make something, propagating different ornamental plants. So it is a small, some small plot. So we had this Soviet type dacha where my grandmother was responsible for growing potatoes, cabbages, all this food stuff, and father have responsibilities on vines and the orchard. He did wines and distilled spirits, and my mother all the times was passionate with plants and with flowers. Somehow she founded the pieces of ornamental perennials and propagated them, started to do some combinations, and this is what I teach with from the childhood. But this type of activity wasn't the core for me on that times. So as my father and mother were economists, and the profession of landscape designer, it wasn't any prestigious on that times. So I went to the economical university and have this education of prestige for that times. Then the higher education was followed by 12 years of successful career, I would say, in a international corporate company. But planting and the dacha and growing things was on the background. It was like hobby and activity for weekends. And somehow I understood that I have accumulated in my life some despair, because I'm not that good in the career that I would be in the naturalistic environment. So even my colleagues from my work on that asked me suggestions on garden, and I didn't understand any idea. I hadn't any idea of changing of my career. And then when my husband bought a plot for building a house, I started to do something for me, for my family, and then I left Publicis Group Media from finance controller position and start to do something on landscape design. I do courses, finished courses, went to different lectures and read books. And starting from 2008, so this is my work. I made something like 100 gardens, not so much, but people are happy with them. So on the pictures, my gardens from the beginning, and I made projects. I made it with hands and then put it in computer. Now I do SketchUp work, good and lucky with the result. And once the planting book fell into my hands, and this opened naturalistic garden design for me. That this is the table book, study book. I should give it, show this information to people. Ukrainian colleagues could not read English and understand English good, so I decided to do this for them, to make it popular, and I asked Noel to come. And all other, my activity, it's like movement for help people to obtain this knowledge, obtain the knowledge from the England, from the Netherlands, from different countries with the which not available for them because they don't speak English. Once I met Marina Krechko, you know, the famous Ukrainian teacher and famous Ukrainian lecturer and landscape designer, and I understood that I should stay in this movement and do things to involve people into the naturalistic planting environment. We go to, I also organize event for educative event and educative travels. We went to Britain, to Japan last year, to Poland and to the Netherlands and Germany. So, and now I'm happy with this activity.
Great, thank you, Victoria. Yes, you've done a lot, I think, to promote gardening in your country and to make to facilitate learning, which is so exciting. Now we move back to Vilnius, Lithuania, to meet Lina Liubatet, who invited me, I think, 3 years ago to her annual conference. And Lina has a remarkable story, I think, about setting up a business that I thought was like a one-stop shop for garden education and promotion. So, Lina, can we...
Yes, sure.
There you are, Lina, great. So do you want to tell us about Geltonis Karutis?
Yes, sure. Okay, I'll open my presentation. Okay, so here it is. Yeah, so Geltonas Karutės, you can call it simply yellow wheelbarrow, because it's the same only in the Lithuanian language. And actually, I came from a different side of this garden world, and maybe my story is a bit different from what I hear all the time. And maybe this is why what I do in Lithuania is a bit different compared to what is going on in other countries. So this is my story. Let's start with the very beginning. My background is Lithuanian language and literature, and my master degree is in marketing. And I'm not a garden designer until now. I'm not a landscape architect, and actually I don't want to be any of them. When I finished my university, I went to the international companies in a huge glass buildings to work as a marketing professional. And after that, when we moved into our little house, of course, we wanted something to do in the surroundings that we have, our little territory around the house. And the question was what to do with this territory, because I didn't know what to do. Of course, I could think of the lawn and the hedge, and that would be like a traditional thing, what I could do. And I could ask for advice for my mother or for my grandmother, because they know how to grow things, and I don't know. But somehow I didn't want to do the same as they did. But what to do, I didn't know. And then I understood that actually I'm not the only one who doesn't know what to do, who wants something more modern, who wants something to be more aesthetic, but just I didn't know what to want simply. And as I understood that I'm not the only one, so this is where I came to the idea that there is some kind of a niche in this how to say, in this area, let's say so. So Oh, a bit move too fast. So what I saw, what's going on in the market, so it was something like in the culinary, with the culinary books. I always say this comparison because it looks like a very obvious for everyone to understand. There are few covers of the culinary books that are like a really old school ones, and this is what we have today. We have even the saying like a food porn, and we have beautiful pictures. We have books that they look so amazing. And actually, what we have with the gardening, it was the same in Lithuania. You can see the picture on the left. Of course, it's not very appealing, visually, but this is what we had, and our books looked like that in the same style, and the websites that we had in Lithuania were in the same style, and everything looked so old school. When you took the books, you could see, yellow paper with lots of text and no beautiful pictures, but these are the plans. This is what we see. It's very visual. So I thought that I can do something here, and this is where I started. So now, what geltonas karutis, like a yellow wheelbarrow, what we do is mainly garden education, gardening courses. I've started with the courses for the hobbyists, for the people who don't know how to garden, but they are just starting. So this is like the first step for them. But now we organize courses also like a masterclass, so workshops for professionals as well. After like 2 years, I came up with the idea of to make like a conference, like a second step where people could get together and see what's going on in the field, in one day per year in one place where everybody could come and meet. And this is how the conference garden style was born. I have a little 1 minute, so I'll try to play it. I guess you don't hear the sound, right? Okay. So this is the video from the conference that was in 2019, like last year, and there were 700 people. The main focus of the conference is the speeches, and that's why people are coming here. And there is also a little exhibition, the workshop, something fun to do during the breaks. But the main focus is the speeches, and we had Kassenschmidt last year, and we were lucky to have Noel in 2017, like 3 years ago. All right. Okay. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Oh,
Fine.
Okay, so I often hear the question, Lithuania is only, we don't have even 3 million people in the country. It's like Milan has more people as a city than the whole Lithuania. But we have I counted around 1,000 people went to our courses last year. And this conference, we already, there were like 700 attendees who came last year, and everybody are really surprised. Why is that? Because there are quite a huge number of people who are coming here for that kind of a small country. And as we talked, Niall, just before this tea talk, if there's some kind of experience that I could share so that other countries could implement and they could repeat the story to get such a engaged community, garden community, so that people would want to come to enjoy, to create together this and naturalistic gardening style as well. But the thing is, what I do here and why there are so many people, because we can see when we have those numbers only the iceberg, and behind that there is of course a hard job that was done. We have this Geltonas Kartas for 7 years, and actually I built everything, I would say, on the content. This was my first strategy, how I started. I have started with the content. So I wrote, and I'm still writing articles about gardening, and actually design as well as vegetable gardening things. Now I run a YouTube channel, which is, I would say, very successful. I have a few, now 2 videos that hit more than 100,000 views. One is almost 200,000. So I think this is really huge numbers as for a niche channel in YouTube in Lithuanian language. Of course, I also work with the Facebook, and this right part of the slide is the other channels that I don't own. There are garden magazines, there are radio shows that I'm taking part in, like TV shows. I have started this year hosting a radio show, and I also moderate discussions which are open to people live in a museum, territory, garden as well. So this is a really huge content that I create every day, and this is why the people are looking to that for that content, and then they find this Geltonas Karutes, and they like that. Of course, they stay with me, and then I can do something interesting with that. So conference is one of the things. And I think the most important thing is the person who is behind the camera, behind the computer, who is reading, behind the magazine. And maybe this is why I am trying to have this another approach, because usually designers are talking about the work that they feel, about the work that they create, and I am focusing on the person who is reading and who is looking for this information. And I think that's the key, and I think there are many things that are covering this. For example, when I create content, it doesn't matter if it's YouTube or article or anything, I have to look that it's easy to read, easy to understand. The pictures are really nice to look at. Sometimes it should be fun, but always it should be heavy. Heavy, I mean that you have to give something. You cannot give some water just to talk about something and not to say a thing. You have to give something, because nowadays people don't have patience. They want to scroll and they want to see. They want to get their answers quickly. And I'm trying to do that in a very nice way. And of course, it should be inspiring, because if you say that everything is so difficult, so people maybe will not go into gardening because it's not for me. So we have to be, inspiring, and this is what I'm trying to do. So sometimes it's it's the content itself, what you want to say, and there is another side that it has to be, the form of the content has to be also be thought of. Sometimes it's like a performance, and this is what I like. And actually, I would even say that I love people more than I love plants. And maybe that is, I'm sorry, maybe that's why the work that I do is a little bit different from the work that other countries are having. For example, Victoria, I admire you because you are doing something like what I do in Lithuania. But the difference between us is that you are a designer and I'm not. And I don't want to be a designer. People, of course, are approaching me like, I like what you are doing, and so come and make a project for me. And I'm saying, no, I'm not doing that. And I think maybe this is my strength, because when the spring comes and everybody runs to go to the field, I'm sitting, near the computer and I'm working there. So this is what I want to give to people, and this is my recipe, how I gather all the community. And this is the last slide where I'm really happy surrounded by people.
Great, thank you, Lena. Great, thank you. Yes, I must say, I was absolutely astonished at the number of people Lena managed to get together under one roof for that conference. I've never actually done the sum. If you did that same proportion for the British population, how many hundreds of thousands of people actually that there would be there. It's incredible penetration of the market. I was wondering, as a model, is Geltonis carutis a model you think that could be copied by other countries as a way of promoting horticulture in a really contemporary way?
Yes, it could be, but you have to work on the content then very much and very strongly, because now I have the audience here in Lithuania. Many people are saying to me that go to Latvia and the conference, so it will be successful as well, but I'm not going to, because I don't have people whom I could say, hey, come and let's make it together. So of course there are specialists that we had with you, Noel, workshops in Latvia as well, but we had, that's why only one workshop for professionals. Yeah. But it's not for the hobbyists. And actually the garden lovers are often forgotten.
Yes, yes.
And I think this is the key. And my work is, my mission, what I see is to join them together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's why I'm talking to them in the, like, I'm one of them actually. I'm one of the people who are willing to know. I'm not one of the professional who is spreading the word. So it is possible, of course, but you have to work then not from time to time, but you have to work strategically.
Yes, yes.
This job.
And a question for all of you. Annie made this joke at the beginning about my being a man and this whole panel of women. And something that's always interested me is the sort of the gender politics, if you like, of gardening. Because in Britain, we've had a pretty good balance, although I think that balance has shifted from men to women over my career. And I certainly notice, actually, certainly in Ukraine, perhaps a lesser extent in Latvia and Lithuania, very much dominated by women. And there's this kind of effect whereby if a field is too dominated by women, men tend to stay away. how many men do you have? Have you given it any thought about how you can get men engaged with this fantastic way of life or hobby?
Well, I don't think there's a recipe. This is asking how do you engage more women? No, how do you engage more men into knitting? I mean, I don't know. So it's it's either I think it's either either you have it or you're not.
Yeah.
Interested for plants or for things garden.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I think like a good 20 years ago, most chefs here would have been women.
Really, yeah.
That was actually the norm.
Yeah.
And now, of course, most chefs are men.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that shift happen? I don't know. It's just one of those things.
In Ukraine, I would say that some men come from architecture and from planting. So they are some agriculture men who has roots with industrial planting for orchards, for apples or wines like that. Mm-hmm. And they come from that industry.
Yeah.
And somehow in Ukraine there is a public organization who made these conferences and different events for the community, gardening community, for professionals, of course. And there are plenty of men, even some like me changing the career. I know a couple of guys who come from banking and now are very popular garden designer. Yes.
Really? Yeah. Yes. Great. Yes. A healthier lifestyle.
Yeah.
Healthier for the world, probably. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. That was fantastic. We've had some great messages in. So yes, thank you, Noel, and all your guest lecturers. What a marvellous masterclass. This is from Joe Burns in Ireland. Sadly, we in the West underestimated the East for far too long. When we travel there, our eyes are opened. Nick Aitman, very inspiring people. Thank you all. So that was great. I mean, I think we've shone some light on developments in Eastern Europe, and I'm sure in future years we'll be hearing a lot more about your plants and your gardens. So thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Noel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you and bye.
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 Guys, girls, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel.
Thank you. Bye, Rasa. Bye, Lena. Now, have we got Annie?
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, Annie. Hi.
Hello. Yes, very interesting. Very interesting. Great.
Yeah, I'm still reading the
question. There was a question for you, actually, Lena. Did you see it? Saying you're an influencer, a content creator, but I'm curious where the credibility is coming from. Do you work with garden designers and gardeners to create the content that you work with?
Sure.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, well, it depends. When for example, when I talk about how to plant the tomato into the pot, actually this is the subject that it will be shown after half an hour on the TV. So no, it's my experience. There is nothing so special to talk about, in the 4-minute episode, and that's why I never say that I'm garden designer. And if sometimes news portals they are quick to say that I'm garden specialist, and then no, delete that. I say yes, I'm a content creator, and I'm a blogger. I'm a vlogger, but I'm not a garden designer. And that's why when I say about those things, if I am the one who is talking, then I say that I am the one, and this is my experience. So I share my experience as everybody does. Everybody can do that when you have the social media. But what I do, I want to join all the people that are in the field. So that's why I'm going to the gardens. I'm visiting designers. I'm having interviews with them. I want to spread their work, and they are advocating for themselves. They are explaining why they have chosen that plan for this location, etc. So then my job is just to give the question.
Yeah, great.
Great.
Have we still got Malgoza? Is she here? Is she there, or has she gone?
I think Malgosha.
It's gone. Has she?
Well,
you might be able to answer this, Noel. Angela, who's in
Poznan.
Yeah.
So
does she still have a nursery there?
Well, Malgosha's no. I mean, Malgosha's family business was actually finished with the end of coal subsidies, at the end of communism. There are certainly some very good perennial nurseries in Poland, and they're a lot cheaper than they are in Germany. So worth making the expedition. Great. So we've got another great lineup next week, haven't we, Annie?
We have indeed. Yep, we've got a mixture of gardeners, designers. We also have another panel, don't we? We've got a sort of Chelsea panel to talk about Chelsea on Tuesday. But we do have a international mix again, really international, and we do have, you know, probably one of our best known landscape designers as well in the middle of the week. So it's going to be a very busy week and a very packed week. But yeah, look forward to seeing everybody back here next week.
Great.
Have a lovely weekend, everybody. And
yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Take care.
You're doing a really great job.
Thank you. And you. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.